CNN is doing their best to lynch Sheriff David Clark. They have made absurd charges to try to keep him from being put in a position with the Department of Homeland Security. Now, right now, he is Milwaukee County's sheriff. He has been an outspoken supporter of gun rights and other issues, a very frank individual in terms of law enforcement. We don't usually get people that are this plain spoken. But they're coming after him. The CNN grammar Nazis are coming after him, going after his thesis with trumped-up charges about plagiarism. It's amazing. You won't believe what they're saying about Sheriff Clark. And they're saying this, he said, and pushing back against them, he said, this is about weakening, like I said, the support that I have and that I have with President Trump and Secretary Kelly is to weaken their resolve to hang in there with me. Yeah, they don't want President Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kelly hanging in there with him. They want to lynch him. He says, will it be successful? He says it might, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So what is the issue that they're saying here? Well, Sheriff Clark did a thesis. I think it was a master's degree that he did. And CNN reported this last weekend that there were dozens of passages from his, yes, it's a master's thesis that he did back in 2013, that he used direct lines from other sources and only credited them in the footnotes. He credited them. He said, I'm crediting these sources here, but he didn't put quote marks around it. Don't you just hate it when you got these grammar Nazis correcting you with your comments online? And here they are, even though he credited them in the footnotes, they say you didn't use quotation marks correctly, therefore you are a plagiarist. He denied the plagiarism allegations. He said the reporter who authored the report was a sleazebag with a political agenda. That's what I said. Sheriff Clark tells it like it is. He's very plain spoken. He could have said a lot more about that. I probably would have. Meanwhile, we have the White House Trade Guild is freaking out about Infowars. Yesterday, when I was doing the radio show, we had Dr. Jerome Corsi, who we have hired to be our Washington bureau chief. And he joined us saying, hey, I'm here in the press room. We're moving forward with our presence here in Washington, D.C. I've got a White House press credentials here. And the mainstream media freaked out about that. We got an article here from The Hill saying, Infowars claimed on Monday that it had been approved for White House press credentials. But it appears the conspiracy-driven website, founded by Alex Jones, received only a temporary one-day pass. No bias at all here from The Hill, right? Yeah, there you go. They're so objective and so unbiased. No, see, it's a real threat to them. The White House Press Corps operates like an old trade guild, and they're very, very jealous and resentful of anybody who would get into that, who would threaten their monopoly. See, they practice access journalism. They're very important because they're there in the White House, and so therefore, because they're in the White House, you should listen to what they have to say. They are authoritative. And, you know, just because we get into the White House, that doesn't mean that it is authoritative, but it means that you're going to get different questions. You're going to get a different analysis than you're going to get from the mainstream media. But they feel threatened by that free speech ability. Very threatened by it, as a matter of fact. I thought it was kind of interesting to see some of the tweets that some of the trolls put out here. People who are reporters, people who are part of this White House Press Guild monopoly. One of them was a guy named Trey Yingst, and I had to look him up. I didn't know who he was. He said Infowars was given a day pass, White House credential, not a permanent press pass. High school students can apply for day passes. Well, here's the deal. As Dr. Corsi pointed out yesterday when we were talking, there's a process. The first part of the process is we had to hire somebody. Okay, that's the first. You have to get reporters that are there. Then they apply for day passes. Then they get weekly passes. Then after they've done that for 3 months, they can apply for a permanent pass. It is a process. And I would just point out to Trey Yingst that your presence there, Trey, means that having an audience is not a requirement, because I don't think you have an audience. You have zero presence here, but you seem to be very worried that somebody is going to threaten your presumed monopoly in terms of covering the White House, in terms of asking questions. There will be different questions. Dr. Corsi has done some very interesting analysis of what's really keeping Obamacare afloat. It is funded by theft, and they don't want to have these types of questions asked. Meanwhile, we see the White House budget has been released today, and going back just about 2 months ago, we saw CNN headlines say the Trump budget that they teased at that point bemoans the $20 trillion debt but it does bupkis about it. And now that he has put something out that would do something about it, now they're screaming bloody murder that he is doing cuts. So first they criticize him because he's not doing enough to stop the deficit. And then when he says, well, here's where I'd like to cut, they scream bloody murder. The White House on Tuesday vigorously defended President Trump's $4.1 trillion budget proposal. They said the plan represents Trump's campaign promises that have been put on paper. They said, this is the House Budget Director, said there's not a single thing cut from Social Security or Medicare. Why? Because that's what he promised. They say, we look at spending differently. We're not going to measure compassion by the number of programs or people that are on them. And I hope that is, they keep that mindset when they start to look at Obamacare. If we get into the situation that we look at the number of people who have been given coverage by stealing money from other programs, stealing money from private investors and Freddie and Fannie, then we really are done. We need to have a different yardstick than the number of people who are on a program that is organized theft. But they say even before the documents released, Democrats were organizing against it, and that is precisely the situation. And understand that when they talk about cuts, that frequently what they're doing is talking about cuts that were less than the planned increase. Typically when you look at this, and typically when you look at people pushing back against proposed cuts, what they're saying is that instead of this program growing by $200 million, it's only going to grow by $100 million. And they see that as a $100 million cut. I see it as a $100 million increase. And so that's really what the problem is. And as Michael Snyder pointed out today, it's time to put the limited back in limited government. Let's abolish the EPA. That's a good place to start. And clearly, that is one of the places that Donald Trump has focused on. There are 66 programs that he would propose to eliminate in this budget. And many of those should be eliminated. The Education Department, for example, nearly $5 billion is what he would eliminate. Why do we even have $5 billion? Let's eliminate the entire thing. That's just a small part of the Department of Education. The Department of Education did not exist before Jimmy Carter. And then when we had President Reagan, he campaigned on abolishing it. It was still a very small program, but he didn't do anything to stop it. As a matter of fact, he grew it to where it was several times the size that it was when he took office. That is the problem in Washington. On the other side, we see John McCain. He says that the budget deal is going to be dead on arrival. Why doesn't John McCain like it? Well, because he wants even more money for defense spending. The Democrats say there's too much money for defense spending. I agree with them, quite frankly. The increase is bigger than the budget, the entire defense budget of Russia. That's the increase that we have. But that's not big enough for warmonger John McCain. Dr. Strangelove himself. He said the president's $603 billion defense budget request is inadequate. We can't defend ourselves with that. No, we can defend ourselves with far less. What we cannot do is act as an empire and conduct 7, perhaps 8 different wars now as we look at the intrusions into Yemen. We cannot conduct all of these wars simultaneously and continuously on that kind of budget, but maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should not be an empire. Trump's budget is expected to be met with swift resistance from military hawks like McCain, who has suggested that not $603 billion, but $640 billion, and not a penny less for John McCain. And when you look at the different organizations that are on the budget, as Zero Hedge looks at it, most of them are getting a decline. The EPA getting the biggest decline, 31%. Education Department is down by 14%. Some of these are up, though. The Department of Homeland Security is up by 7%. The VA is up by 6%. The Defense Department is up by 5%, that type of thing, okay? But let's understand where this is. As Zero Hedge is looking at this, they said there's one big problem with the Trump budget, and that is that they are assuming that we're going to continue our recovery. We have a current expansion that began in June 2009, and it was a very weak expansion, but it has already lasted for 95 months. We have never seen a situation where we have gone on for a 10-year period. And that's the fundamental assumption. That's why it's not going to work, even if it wasn't dead on arrival. Stay with us. We'll be right back.